It's taken 5 years of daily videos, but I've finally reached the single game that is most responsible for my documentation of the PlayStation library. I was digging around websites, checking out games that I had never heard of, and I came across a blurb that mentioned that Machi was voted the 6th best game of all time by Famitsu readers. Now, I don't put a lot of stock into that kind of poll, but popular things are popular for some reason. So I got curious about Machi, and that sent me down a whole rabbit hole. And here I am, after 1,916 videos, I'm finally back at Machi. Machi is the third game in Chunsoft's sound novel series. I talked about the second game in the series a while ago, since the PlayStation port of Kamaitachi no Yoro was released just a month before Machi. And I'll get to the first game in the series a couple months from now, as a port of Otoguriso is going to be released in late March. Otoguriso is the game that basically defined the format of visual novels back when it was released on the Super Famicom in 1992. It was a horror game, and so was the follow-up Kamaitachi no Yoro. Those two games were massive hits, and they were copied by a lot of people, as you might have noticed from all of the horror visual novels that I've covered. Machi was originally released for the Sega Saturn in 1998, so yes, this is another case of a game getting ported to the PlayStation as that platform died. And you might have noticed that there's a 4-year gap between Sound Novel 2 and Sound Novel 3. In that gap, Chunsoft only managed to release 2 games, and they were both Shiren the Wanderer entries for their Mystery Dungeon series. The development of Machi seems to have been a bit tortuous. It was definitely an enormous, elaborate production, unlike anything the Japanese video game industry had seen before. And then finally, after that long development period, Machi was released, and it bombed. Horribly. The Saturn version sold 12,000 copies. For a game company that had made the biggest hits of the 80s and 90s, Machi was a disaster. Now, the PlayStation port did pick things up a bit, but the game never sold particularly well, and a lot of the blame for that was put on the visual style, which is a significant part of why the game took so long to come out. Unlike previous Chunsoft sound novels, Machi features digitized graphics. Almost every image in the game is a photograph or live-action video. There are 2 significant exceptions to that, though. And by 1998, the FMV backlash was in full swing. A game made up of digitized pictures would have to work hard to pull in an audience. The big thing that stands out about Machi is the distinctive structure of its narrative. The broad, one-sentence summary is, lives intertwine across 5 dramatic days in Shibuya. But that doesn't really convey the scope. There are 8 characters who you follow across those 5 days, selecting one of them, and getting bits and pieces of their story. But their stories intersect with everyone else's stories. And the little things that they do have consequences on other people. This man is going to go propose to his girlfriend who works in a jewelry store. You have to choose between stopping and buying her a cake, or buying her flowers on the way. If you choose to buy the cake, then when you get to the cafe, another character has just ordered the last piece of cake, and he has to wait until more is available. And then because of that delay, when he gets to the jewelry shop, his girlfriend has been murdered. If he had chosen flowers, that fate could be avoided. If the other character had decided to go to the movies instead of the cafe, then that wouldn't have happened. Now, to prevent the storyline from getting completely out of control, you'll often hit choke points in characters' narratives where they have to wait for something else to advance. Sometimes you'll be changing one thing to avoid a bad ending, and sometimes you'll just have to jump from another storyline to resolve their cliffhanger, a process that the game calls zapping. While you're following along, sometimes words will be highlighted, and you hit the square button to select those. Words highlighted in blue give you a little bit of extra information, and this is often a joke. Words in green will provide you with information about the game's story and characters, and that's where you'll find the links to zap you between plot lines. While all the plot threads will dovetail at the end of the 5th day, every character has their own story that they're following to that point. Amamiya Keima is a nerd detective, though he'd rather you call him a gamer. He's the worst detective on the police force and is assigned to the juvenile division, making sure that kids get to school and stay there. But while he's patrolling the Shibuya Scramble Crossing, a mysterious message appears on one of the big TVs that seems to be a bomb threat. And now he'll have to patrol the arcades to stop this bomb. Amamiya's storyline has some significant changes from the Saturn original, because he spent a lot of time visiting Sega arcades. All that had to be edited around for the PlayStation version. Hosoi Yoko is the only woman that you follow in the cast, and after her boyfriend says she's too fat, he demands that she lose 17 kilograms in 5 days or he'll break up with her. That's about 38 pounds. Of course, the only real way that someone could do that would be with a chainsaw and taking off their own leg, since losing over 7 pounds a day on a diet would probably be fatal. She has a part-time job at Tower Records, and that brings her into contact with a lot of the other characters. Umabe Jirotaro is an actor who's finally getting his big break. After years of playing background thugs, he's going to have the starring role in a TV show where he's playing a crime boss in the middle of a gang war. One problem for Umabe: despite his rough appearance that got him cast in the role, he's a nervous, timid guy who struggles with playing the role of this tough guy. After he botches an expensive take, Umabe becomes embroiled in another character's drama. Fumiyasu Ichikawa is a screenwriter in serious trouble. His career is making him miserable, his son is nothing but trouble, and when he sleeps he's plagued by surreal nightmares. After a close call, he decides he's going to turn his career around and create his greatest artistic masterpiece. Ichikawa's plotline is one of the two that sometimes doesn't use photographs. His dreams are often illustrated instead. Takamine Takashi deserted the French Foreign Legion and returned to Japan, and now he's living on the streets of Shibuya, dealing with PTSD. He has the shortest of all of the scenarios, often skipping ahead in time and having a lot less text. Shinoda Masashi was a university student who had his life together, about to set off onto a good career, and then he met a mysterious woman who went by the name of Sunday. She blackmails him with photographs of him taking part in a student demonstration, and forces him to join her criminal group that blackmails people. Shinoda takes on the identity of Wednesday, and discovers that he enjoys taking part in these criminal enterprises. This is the longest and most involved of the 8 stories that you follow across all 5 days, and I haven't played it far enough to know if there's a man who was Thursday. Tobisawa Yohei is the most popular boy in school, president of the student council, a real ladies' man. And then he sneaks out of school to meet with a girl, and she reveals that she's pregnant with his child, and he doesn't even remember her name. Making things more complicated for Tobisawa is that he's spotted by the least popular boy in school. Finally, there's Ushio Masami, a former Yakuza who's trying to make good. He's going to propose to his girlfriend, but when he gets to her shop, he interrupts a robbery, and the robbery knows him from his Yakuza days. Ushio's mistaken for an accomplice, and he has to figure out how to deal with that. Also, it turns out that Ushio looks exactly like Umabe Jirotaro, the actor. Well, I'm sure that won't have consequences for both of them. All the cast of the game are played by models and small-time actors, with one notable exception. One of the background characters is played by Kubozuka Yosuke, who, just 2 years after this game was released, will win the Japan Academy Film Prize for Best Actor for his role in Go. Something that you might have picked up on as I described all of those plotlines is that Shibuya is a big part of the story. It's the ward of Tokyo that I really think you can call the heart of the city. Maybe its most famous landmark is the Scramble Crossing, the busiest intersection on Earth where several thousand people cross the streets every time the lights change. All the locations in Machi are around Shibuya. The streets, the businesses, the parks. And of course, while they were making the game, it's not like they could shut anything down. And so you get a lot of the flavor of Tokyo in the 90s. In a weird way, Machi has become a period piece. And the cultural footnotes that come up in the text help with that a lot. Now, if you were fond of the old style of Chunsoft sound novels where all of the characters were presented in silhouette, that option is still available for you here. The game defaults to normal mode, which are the pictures, but putting it in silhouette mode changes the pictures so that everyone has a flat color placed on top of them. If you choose to do this, then some of the video segments won't play. They didn't shoot multiple versions of those for the silhouettes, but it's an interesting way to bring back some of that flavor. There's also some features included for making things a bit more readable. By holding down R1, you can dim the background, which makes the text stand out a bit more. And if you just want to see the picture, you can press and hold R2. That will make all of the text go away. Unfortunately, there isn't a rewind feature if you accidentally advance the text too far. Something added for the PlayStation version is a timeline view, and this will show you how the story is advancing for all of the characters, plus lets you jump back to any point that you need to. And when you choose a scene, you can even jump straight to the decision point that you need. The bad endings aren't necessarily bad. For example, here Yoko is trying to go to a weight loss clinic, but the elevator is out of order, and then as she goes up the stairs there's a line of people. So she gets in line, and it turns out it's for an audition, and she becomes a famous actress. The bad endings really are just an end to that storyline that doesn't make it through all 5 days. There's over 120 of these in Machi, and the game will keep track of which ones you've seen. When you do reach a bad end, the game will tell you where things went wrong and will let you go back to change them. You can turn these hints off if you like, and if you're playing on the default settings, the hints become less useful as you progress through the story. Or if you just want the story, then you can set the game to easy, and it will always tell you where things went wrong, regardless of how far you've progressed. Although Machi sold poorly on release, the way it gained a reputation after its PlayStation release meant that it eventually got a sequel. 428, which means Shibuya, was initially released on the Wii in 2008, and then ported to just about everything. It's even been released in English, and while that still didn't sell especially well, a new sequel was announced in 2025. So they're not done with Shibuya yet. Like I said at the beginning, Machi is a beloved classic in Japan. The poll I found had it listed as the 6th greatest game of all time, and a more recent Famitsu poll that I found had it as the 5th best adventure game of all time. Its sequel 428 was in the number 2 slot. Even if it didn't sell super well, it was enormously influential. A lot of later visual novels would take cues from it, even if they weren't copying it directly. My own personal feeling is that if you're going to play any visual novel on the PlayStation, it's got to be Machi. It's got rough edges, the actors in the story aren't necessarily the greatest, and I'd prefer a little bit more variety in the storylines. But it's an enormous achievement. It's easy to see why those people who did play it back in the 90s were very impressed. Would I call it the 6th best game of all time? Well, probably not. But that's a popularity poll for you.